Hello, year six. I've remembered to put myself in this top right corner this time so that I'm out of the way of everything that comes up. It is our English session now, Tuesday the 26th of January, just like it was when I told you it was the 26th of January earlier in the big read, but we'll ignore that bit. So, our English today. We're trying to use the same system as much as I can in the English as well, albeit not always managing to do the 3 levels of colour for challenge, but we are still following the same pattern in terms of starter, recap, all that jazz. So, 2 starters there for you. I know we're not doing SATs, well aware of that. However, some of the past questions are still useful, particularly because it is the sort of thing you will need to know in secondary school. Still plenty of grammar and stuff in secondary school. So 2 SATs questions there for you, past SATs questions. The first one, it wants you to insert a pair of commas in the correct place in the sentence below. I've chosen that one particularly because we looked at parenthesis in the last unit, and it's something we're still going to be looking at again this time. So important to be able to remember how to do the parenthesis. So I'd like that sentence written out with the commas put in for me. And then in this one, tick 1 box in each row to show whether the sentence is a question, a statement, or a command. And again, if you can, I'd like you to draw out that table, please, with those in. If you aren't great, if you've not got a ruler or whatever at drawing out your table, just write the sentence and then next to the sentence, write down a dash and then either write question, statement, or command, so I know which one you're going for. But that is your starter. So pause the screen here and have a go at those 2 starter questions for me, please. When you've done that, start the video up again, and I'll get on with telling you a little bit about today's lesson. Speak to you in a moment. Okay, so our Walt and our Wilf then. I think I've got these in the wrong order, by the way. Should be Walt and Wilf next, and then a recap. We'll do the recap in a moment. Oh no, of course we won't do a recap, because yesterday was a cold write, so there's nothing to recap on a cold write. Of course there isn't. That's why I've gone straight into the Walt and the Wilf. See, we're all learning, even me. So, understand a genre of writing is what we're learning to do. And then what I'll be looking for is you highlighting key features of that genre, explaining the purpose of these features, and answering questions about those features. So let's just unpick that a little bit. We are learning to understand a genre of writing. Now, genre is just a posh word. It's a posh word that means category, really. It's what category that writing fits into. It's just the correct and proper term for that. When we're talking about genres of writing, we're talking about diaries, newspaper reports, stories, narrative stories, poems. We're talking about non-chronological reports. We're talking about, what else have I not said? We're talking about debate writing, persuasive writing. We're talking about all sorts of different things. And they each have their own features. There are things that go in all of them. So when you're identifying and highlighting key features, there's no use saying, oh, capital letters. That's in everything. There's no use saying, oh, they've used a noun. Of course they've used a noun. Everything uses a noun. We're looking for specific genres, genre-specific features, things that only really come up in those things, or at least are in those things and not in some other things. And then when we're talking about explaining the purpose of these features, that's when we're thinking about why are they in there. The writers don't do things for nothing. If they're being used, these features, if it's there for a reason, and we need to start being able to identify them. If we can identify the reason why things are there, we're going to be much more likely to use those things in our writing. And our writing, as a result, will get much, much better. That's why the best writers are the best readers. The more reading you do, the more competent and skilled you are as a writer. It's no different to being a good football player. The best football players are the football players who do a lot of football, play a lot of football, watch a lot of football, do a lot of training, see the people doing it well. Well, people who are writing books and getting them published, they are the people who are doing the best writing. So you need to read the best writing to be able to do the best writing. Anyway, getting sidetracked. Let's have a look at today's task then. So, yesterday, as I just mentioned, I asked you to continue part of a story, and I provided you with the beginning of that story, and then you continued it for your cold write. And this was the beginning of that story. I'll read it quickly for you now. Silence. Well, virtually silence at least. Somewhere, from the very bowels of the cave, there floated the steady, monotonous dripping of single water droplets, colliding against the ancient, unyielding granite. Elliot took another step. He didn't dare walk any faster than 1 step at a time. His footfall, gentle as he could have placed it, still sent an echo rippling down the tunnel. It seemed deafening in the otherwise soundless void. Breath held, teeth clenched, fists balled. He waited to see if he had been heard. From the depths of the darkness, like some giant stomach churning in hunger, there came an angry, pain-filled groan. So, that's what I gave you, and you all carried that story on in your own unique, individual, and independent ways. And there was some brilliant stuff, which is brilliant and great. It means it's a tough job, though, for some of you to improve and get even better than that in the hot right. I know you will, but tough job nonetheless. So, today, what I've done is I've carried on the story slightly for you. Not carried it on loads, I've not finished it by any means, but I've carried it on. So I'll just read over the bit that I've added on. I'm not going to read the bit I've just read, I've just done that, but I'll carry it on from there. Elliot felt the groan ripple through his body, almost as though he had been struck with a physical wave. It seemed to vibrate his bones and set his teeth chattering. Suddenly, the cold seemed to strangle him in an icy grasp, choking the fear that had been holding back up to the surface. Forcing his fear back under his control with a deep, indrawn breath, Elliot took another step, then another. His stealth was clearly pointless now. He had been heard. Picking up the pace, Elliot began to lightly jog down the tunnel towards the now increasingly angry moan. Okay, so if I look back at the success criteria that I gave you yesterday, apologies, I'm clicking the screen when I don't mean to. This was our success criteria, and these were the things you tried to incorporate in your cold write. These are the things that we're going to be covering in this unit. All of them will have been covered by the time you then move on to doing your hot write. Some of them you already know how to do really well. Expanded noun phrases we've talked about, you know how to do those, but we will cover them again. Figurative language, including similes, metaphors, personification, alliteration, etc. Authorial tone, that's making it sound like a narrative story. Third person, that's the use of the narrator. Range of sentence types, simple, compound, complex, etc. That you're linking your paragraphs, that you're punctuating for a parenthesis, and that you're using semicolons to connect two main clauses. So what I'd like you to do today is have those in mind. You might even want to have them up. Most of you wrote them in yesterday with your cold write, so you might want them in front of you. But I want you, please, to go through and try and identify as many features from this text as you can. Now, I appreciate this is really tricky. You've not got a hard copy of this, a paper copy of this, which is not ideal. So it might be that you need to try and sort of screen grab this and do it on Word, highlighting it. It might be, and I'm very sorry if this is the process you'd need to go through, but it might be that you need to write this out and then highlight it. Hopefully some of you might have access to a printer. If you have, print it out and then you can highlight that. If not though, and you'd rather not write it all out because you know it will take you an age. If some of you are slower writers than others, that's just the way it is. If that is the case, then you can just write down the feature equals and then put a quote of where that feature has been used. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read over this text and I'd like you to identify as many places where you think it is showing a feature of a narrative story as you can. And some of those features will be the things that were on that success criteria. That's why they were there. So you can have a go at identifying them. When you've done that, you should be able to start seeing more and more of them coming up. So here I've identified expanded noun phrases, for example. Ancient, unyielding, granite. Soundless void. That's just a noun phrase rather than an expanded one, but I'm including them as well. Giant stomach. Angry, pain-filled groan, icy grasp, deep, indrawn breath. So if you haven't got a copy because you can't print it or you can't do it on the screen, what I would do is I would write the word expanded noun phrase or noun phrase equals, and then I'd quote just those bits. So that way you're not having to write everything down because that will take an age. And we don't want you wasting time when there's no real benefit to it. So that is your first task, to go through and identify at the very least, so this is sort of like your green and orange challenge, to identify the areas from the success criteria that I've used. The red challenge would be to identify any other areas that you think are examples and features of a narrative text, a narrative story. When that's done, your next task is to have a go at answering these questions. I'll just move myself down to this corner so I'm out of the way. And again, this time they are in the green, the orange, and the red. So the green question that I'd like you to answer is, what makes well, the green questions, plural, should I say, because there's 3. What makes a narrative, which is a story with a narrator, different from a diary? Is the narrative that you've highlighted today, so the one we've just looked at, is that written in first or third person? And how would you know, before you even started reading it, that you were reading a story rather than a newspaper report? I'm not going to read you all of orange and all of red. You're more than capable of reading those. So that is your extension. So a reminder, just before I say goodbye. You are highlighting a text, either highlighting it physically or writing this feature equals and then quoting where that feature has been used, ensuring that you punctuate it right every time. When you've done that, you're then having a go at choosing your challenge and answering those questions. When you've done that, take a picture, scan it in, type it up, whatever you do, and send it in to me. And I'll be back with you tomorrow for tomorrow's big read and tomorrow's English task. But for now, that is everything from me. So goodbye. See you tomorrow.